21st, one of the greatest achievements in history, still remains a source of control.
Small step for man, one mankind.
Did the Apollo moon landings, or were they the biggest hoax of all time? Trevor Weaver has dedicated years of research to the Apollo missions, a supporter of the moon landings.
We didn't go to the moon. It's an established fact. NASA provided all the topography, all the photographs, all the massive models to Stanley Kubrick, actually fake moon scenes.
Could the moon have been faked by Hollywood director Stanley Kubrick? The history books say otherwise, that Apollo 11 astronaut Aldrin spent 3 days traveling to the moon and was the first to follow Neil footsteps.
Beautiful, beautiful.
I'm totally in favor of freedom of speech, but I think we need to be responsible when they think about intentionally misleading the young people who are of our world.
Moon conspiracy theorists have been a persistent and vocal group, over the years often confronting astronauts of lying. In 2002, theorist Bart Sibrel buttonholed Buzz Aldrin, his temper.
You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle, saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me.
You're a coward and a liar.
The punch stirred a generation less trusting of tradition, more open to believing fake news and theories spread on the internet, and the moon landings hoax theories.
NASA knew that we would have something called the internet. It's only now those videos are available that people can see.
I think the propagation of so-called fake news spread, which is very welcome of access to the internet, means that we have than we're used to. There is a real crisis in understanding the strength of those. So people often have some kind of distrust of authority, governments and so on, that there's some kind of plot to keep the information from us. The propaganda victory of going to the moon could be based on some fabricated.
But if the Apollo missions were faked, NASA had managed to keep one of the biggest secrets ever created. 50 years ago, the Soviet Union were locked in a struggle for global dominance. Then, on October 7, the Soviets launched Sputnik, the world's first satellite, a breakthrough that hit America hard and made the race to space.
There's no doubt that the space race in the 1990s by superpower rivalry, there was a degree of anxiety in the West, advancement in Soviet technology, and feeling the West somehow had lost, needed to catch up.
We choose to go to the moon and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because...
NASA employed 400,000 people. Was putting a man on the moon so important that the United States got it? If so, a legion of NASA employees nodded in the deception, but they kept the secret from the rest of the...
Such a seminal event that it wasn't just about the mission, it's that influenced wider life. People began to think, oh, we can do space trade to other worlds.
On July the 16th, 1969, Apollo 11 astronauts prepared for liftoff. But while the world eagerly awaited for history to be made, one already skeptical. 60s, Bill Kaysing was the head of technical publications for Rocket, the company that helped manufacture the Apollo rockets, who claimed he had access to some of its top secret documents, questioned the COP project.
I really believe that they weren't in capsule at launch. They did a magician act with the astronauts. They went up the elevator, down the elevator. In other words, they did not want to risk the astronauts in case the Saturn blew up.
An X, which Kaysing said the CIA tried to silence by making life. Like Kaysing, Marcus, publisher of Nexus, a magazine of alternative politics, history and science, questions NASA's engineering capability at the time of the launches.
The whole Apollo program was a complete fabrication to be seen to succeed in the Cold War. The myth is what is holding NASA back from future space journey. We didn't go the first time, we can't go now. They lied to us.
But to put a man on the moon, it would have had to fake the evidence. And it have done the most to fuel conspiracy theories.
Every photograph taken on the lunar surface is online, 5,001. Some of them are not particularly good. Some are out of light struck. Some just don't show very much of interest. Very good indeed. And it's the very good ones I question. They were taken on the moon. They were taken here on Earth.
Conspiracy theorists believe NASA faked all 6 things, and point to these NASA photographs as proof. Some of the most renowned claims suggest that areas lit from behind shade, when in fact, they reveal full detail. The shadows don't run parallel. Is this because they were lit by separate, suggesting film lighting? Despite being no stars are visible in any of the Apollo photographs. Gravity on the moon is 1/6 of that on Earth, but when arced up, the astronauts appear to be running at normal speed in Earth's gravity. With no atmosphere on the moon, why does the flag seem to... We filmed an experiment on a lunar set built in the Trone, Californian desert to challenge the hoax theories and put these claims by testing some conspiracy arguments and addressing new evidence. Can we put the loop rest once and for all?
This is Apollo Control Houston at 105 hours at Apollo 11.
People all over the world were eagerly tuned in to these. Astronomer Sir Patrick Moore reported the mission live on British.
Ever since the dawn of human history, we dreamed about going to the first time it had been done. And of course it was an exciting time, a very tense one.
5, 4, 3, 1. 0. Liftoff. We have a lift.
There were some amateur radio enthusiasts who built a very large dish and radioed into the astronauts talking from the moon's surface. They didn't hear mission control, just the astronauts by themselves.
He witnessed the event from a unique perspective. A student at the Telescope near Manchester, England, he took advantage of the facilities mission of his own accord.
I should say that we were not in the Apollo craft. We were doing this for fun, our own fun and our own interest.
Apollo 11 entered and gave us a magnificent ride.
Conversation of the astronauts all the way down to the surface. They were obviously highly excited. It's been wonderful as they sort of literally reached the surface.
Got my window right now. I can observe the entire continent of America. Okay, engine stop. Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has...
And then the Eagle was landed. And that to me was a minute of intense relief and live. I had to watch what I said.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
1969, the public had little reason to question mankind's history. After all, the achievement was a celebration of supremacy. America had finally won the space. Mankind's first steps on the moon have become of hoax theories. Conspiracy theories faced a formidable challenge with its primitive 1960s technology. Just 14 months before the Apollo 11 mission, West piloted a prototype lunar lander. The result?
Unfortunately, it went out of his, and luckily he was able to eject before it crashed in. A simulator to work on Earth, how in the world could the actual lunar module to work on the moon?
And of course I knew both Neil and Buzz. There was no provision. Had they made a faulty landing, they couldn't have gone back. And that would have been dead.
Conspiracy theorists question not only the capabilities of the landing craft, but also the computing power.
They didn't have the technology to do it. It's too great. They could not afford to risk failure. Allow themselves to rely on science and technology.
Pat Norris is a system and software engineer hired by NASA to analyze the challenge to the moon and back.
In the 1950s, it didn't really exist, but by the mid-1960s, available that were powerful enough to do the calculations needed for a complicated mission. Of course, by comparison with today's computers, they were.
While these advancements should surely encourage a new, conspiracy theorists argue that this is enough to question even in the first place.
We're talking about the mid-90s when computers occupied rooms. The sort of computer with a mobile phone today would be greater than the computing to have been used to land man on the moon.
One of the we had difficulty in navigating close to the moon was that we weren't able to provide a sufficiently detailed mathematical model. Perhaps there wasn't enough information. But even if the computers probably wouldn't have been able to cope with it, they were adequate, the mission at the time, but only just.
Unlike seas, the Apollo computers didn't have to store files, or most of the number crunching was done at mission control, transmitted back to the astronauts. In their attempt to disprove the missions, conspiracy theorists footage of the moon landings frame by frame. One of the most famous street is Buzz Aldrin's dance across the moonscape.
The 2.5 hours in front of the television camera, I did to prance around and hop and demonstrate different moving around. The movement, because of the restriction, was basically like being in slow motion.
The famous lunar walk shows Aldrin experimenting with the suit.
So-called kangaroo hop does work, but it seems ability is not quite as good.
Have claimed that the footage was actually filmed in slow motion in a studio, so were supported by wires to replicate these movements on the moon.
No, it's dangling on a wire to take off, if you like, between the Earth gravity and the moon gravity. The wire was between the body. The problem is the astronauts tended this wire, so you see lots of jerky movement.
Astronauts were wearing pretty big and bulky spacesuits. Distribution isn't the same as you or I walking around on the surface of the Earth. The astronauts had to really cope with that and work out if they're top heavy, how to move around such that they weren't going to fall over all the time and be
have to be rather careful to keep track of what it is.
You can see that astronauts really adapted really well to that and kind of developed this new walk.
While the X-Moon couldn't be replicated on Earth, NASA introduced methods to it. One of their favorite methods was parabolic flight, what's called it the vomit comet. By climbing series of arcs, an aeroplane could simulate 30-second windows of the. These sessions served as road trips and gave astronauts their first tastes of lunar gravity. If, as the NASA faked the Apollo missions, then it also had to fake the first.
I was trained as a photographer in London back in. I was familiar with the camera that was used, the Hasselblad camera, film that was used, Kodak Ektachrome transparency material, with the technical side of it. And the more I looked at the photograph, I started to doubt whether what we'd been told had happened actually happened the way we'd been told.
Also siding with American conspiracy theorist Ralph Rene raised a different technical question. Could the gloves the astronauts wore on their pressurized spacesuits have the moon?
What I do is I pull a vacuum in this, and I have a glove inserted inside of it, and that the flexibility they shown in their suits and gloves are impossible. Right now, I can put my hand in there and I can move it every which way. I can grab, I can lift up, down, but as soon as I throw this switch here, the chamber.
As air is sucked out of the machine, the vacuum makes to move the glove.
And this glove doesn't want it backwards. I can hardly force it down. I mean, how could you pickle like they've shown them to do, or trigger a little tiny with the glove doing this?
If it seems impossible to operate a pressurized gloves, how could these perfect pictures have been taken? Trained aerospace engineer Jay Windley researched the moon landing conspiracies and was present at the experiment on the refute these theories.
This is a Hasselblad manufactured specially for the lunar missions. It attached to the space this bayonet. The camera would have a framework surround the ear of the camera, and it would slide down onto the control so that the astronaut could work with his hands without worrying about the camera.
Cameras didn't have a viewfinder because the astronauts' helmets prevented them from framing the shot.
Basically, you could just sort of point that wanted without having to really look through a viewfinder.
But according to Grist, this was a problem that couldn't be solved.
They had to poke the shutter, the speed, set the aperture by hand. Whereas you can't see the shutter button on a Hasselblad, it's on the front of the camera in the photograph because you can't hear anything in space. You can't see the notes on the side of the camera. So with all those restrictions, we have some of the best I've ever taken in the 20th century. I don't believe it.
I'll step out, pictures here.
Jay Windley investigated how on the Hasselblad would have been operated by the astronauts.
Lens here has been fitted with these little paddles. Astronaut to manipulate them with clumsy fingers in either direction. The shutter release normally has been made especially large so that it can be pressed with an astronaut's. The focus ring has been fitted with stops that correspond medium, far, and infinity. So he didn't know whether he was 8 feet or 9 feet away from a subject. He wouldn't measure it.
was responsible for teaching Apollo astronauts the art of lunar photography.
Even in the early days, before they went to the moon, I'd say, you know, when you get back from this journey, you will be a national hero. But your photos, if they're good, they'll live forever. I'd tell them your only key to immortality is photography. Nothing else. Forget all the other stuff.
The astronauts were told to take them everywhere they went and practice.
They took them home to photograph their barbecues and sporting events and all other types of things very, very effectively.
All of the crew members understood to operate this, and the film turned out to be in coming up with just outstanding results.
But these outstanding results led to one of the most famous photographic, the strange case of the lunar shadows.
Those are one of the strong proofs that we never went to. If you examine pictures offered by NASA as genuine, that in many cases the shadows are not parallel. The sun was the only source of light. All shadows be exactly parallel, but they aren't.
Because they fall in different directions, some conspiracy theorists claim that separate artificial light sources.
There's only one or not two. But these shadows are anomalous in that sometimes from objects and sometimes converging. And you can go any place on this planet when the sun's up and you look at two shadows are parallel.
But according to physicists, there are explanations for why we find that shadows aren't always parallel.
There's lots of different things which can make shadows go in different directions. I mean, shadow is pointing away from the sun, but if your camera is a wide-angle camera, effective effect on the shadows.
The effect of converging shadow is an optical phenomena in photography. This effect is created by light source. For both the moon and the Earth, this source is...
If you have bits of topography on the surface, like troughs, they can appear to be at right angles to the main direction of the sun.
But if we look at the photos, Aldrin appears to be brightly lit. Shouldn't the astronaut's body be in darkness?
In a pool of light. It's a spotlight. It's not the sun taken. Here on Earth, on a controlled studio lighting, a whacking great, probably a 12K array spotlight.
On the moon, you're not just illuminated by the sun shining towards you and behind you, but there's also a huge area of the lunar surface around you. It's backlight to any subject on the moon's surface. You can also get light off bright objects like spacesuits if they're fairly close to meeting.
And specifically, the light bouncing off the highly reflective. In these pictures, you can clearly see where a pool of light appears. If you look at pictures where the astronauts are away from the module, they're certainly lit. Suspicion among conspiracy theorists is Apollo's symbolic highlight flag.
Wherever there's an American flag, it's always brilliant, even if it's on the shadow side. And on the shadow side, really dark black. But they had little spotlights, obviously.
Oh, gee, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
The flag was made of nylon, which is fairly translucent material. It lets light through to see one side bright and one side dark.
Here we can see our from the front, but if we move around to the back, you can see that even with our single light source, it's still brightly lit through and making the flag glow.
But why does the lunar flag if there's no wind on the moon?
It's very hot, because when you film in slow motion, right, because each frame has been exposed, they had a frame per second, so they needed very, very strong lights. It was probably very hot. Probably they had some cooling.
Flag, the ultimate proof the landings were faked in a studio. Atmosphere on the moon, the planting of the Apollo flag has caused some
If you look at how the flag swings, the edge of the flag, if you know the length of the pendulum, time of the swing, you can say where the gravity is, and it was on Earth.
So how could the flag, flapping on the windless moon, be explained? Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin may not have been thinking about that question, the historic moment.
Putting the flag on the moon was really a mission. It was one that we had not really rehearsed. To where the flag was stowed, we brought it out, then we had to put the two pieces.
It won't go up. Hey, that end up.
Had to drive the flagstaff into the hard lunar surface with a horizontal aluminium rod kept the flag suspended.
The end of the flag to flip up and back in response to... Also, this is an aluminum tube, very similar to the ones used on the Apollo mission. Springy. If I cause it to spring, we see that this motion continues long after I've let go of it.
Once it's in the surface, then those oscillations gradually dampen away, the vibrations going down the flagpole, and then it's pretty much stable after that.
Beautiful, just beautiful.
Conspiracy theorists point to another strange anomaly, one that by lack of atmosphere. As the sixth half touched down, its powerful rockets would be expected to blast away dust. exposing the rocky lunar surface, were visibly photographed beneath the spacecraft, and there seems to be no landing pads.
One of the problems that was encountered, of course, is lunar dust. And in fact, prior to landing, they'd sent unmanned. One of the concerns was that the lunar surface might actually be so dusty that any spacecraft might actually sink in it. And if it wouldn't support it, unmanned certainly wasn't going to support a manned one.
Ran an experiment to illustrate his notion that the rocket-powered lander should have. If a garden leaf blower, which is dramatically move dust with Earth's gravity, why didn't a rocket which produced 10 thrust?
They didn't move dry dust. They didn't move anything. So the demonstration is to show will disappear immediately, and I'll even be able to gauge some kind of a hole.
If René is correct, the surface, like the gravel pit, would show visible signs of disturbance.
But when it actually landed, well, there, now how can that be? You know, if you blow dust away, it goes away. It swept the ground.
Some people think that you should get a very big crater underneath the rocket nozzle on the... That's not the case, because when they were coming in, they'd already throttled down to at least the maximum thrust, and just above the surface they turned off these. So any exhaust was actually pretty feeble when it landed on the moon.
The engine did not leave a crater of any size.
Can see a very slight depression underneath the rocket nozzle where dust was being radially blown away in different directions around the lunar module.
And a closer inspection of some of the photographs reveals that in fact disturb a very fine layer of dust, but not enough to...
I can see some haze emanating from the descent engine, but very insignificant.
But the NASA images from the mission aren't the only landing on the surface. Satellite lunar surface in more recent years could suggest more compelling evidence of things. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiting spacecraft launched by NASA in 2009 to orbit the Moon.
Using some very high-resolution cameras onto the Moon's surface, it has actually been able to pick out each of the 6 Apollo landings. And not only the descent stages where they landed, flags, the experiments, the 3 rovers that were left on the last 3.
But some argue that these satellite images aren't as detailed as when they were taken in 2011.
The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter deliberately flown over what is purported to be the Apollo, and from a height of 12 miles, i.e. not at all. What do you see? A couple of pixels took these images without NASA putting on a whacking grey arrow. Looking at.
While satellite images of the equipment left behind are detailed enough to persuade some, there are other markers of man-made interference.
I have to say, what you see is just 1 or 2 pixels, but you don't get a sharp picture, a nice clean lunar module. But the LRO pictures do show some of the area where the lunar module took off, so that's with what NASA said.
Alongside the lunar reconnaissance, evidence from other missions have also been able to confirm the Apollo landing site.
Altitude 4200, think you're a go for landing, over.
Of course, we've also had the Chinese and the Japanese with their own lunar missions image the areas in which the landings took place and their air disturbance. So we do have that third-party version the landings themselves took place.
There's one more big question to ask about the Apollo 11 photographs. On the Moon, you would expect a spectacular view of space. No stars in the Apollo photographs.
Some of these conspiracies, if you go to the Moon, you should be able to see stars because there's no atmosphere there, so space should be nice to be able to see a lot more stars than are shown in the Apollo photographs.
Bill Kaysing is convinced this was a conscious part.
If you were to talk to Aldrin or Armstrong, other Apollo astronauts, they would actually respond in any way to questions regarding...
When you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the star in spite of the glare?
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface on the daylight side of the Moon by eye without looking through the optics.
Neil Armstrong, when he saw stars, I knew everybody else was asking. I knew the answer, that your eyes aren't adapted to that.
The human eye by opening and closing the iris. In bright light, the iris. In the dark, it widens. On day, like the camera aperture, can't adjust to the brightness of the lunar surface, space, at the same time.
If you increase the amount of light going in, and if you increase the exposure time, you have light going in. Now, if you were to do that on the Moon to get the stars, then the foreground would just be completely washed out and overexposed. Astronauts were trying to take pictures of was themselves, the surface features of the Moon.
If you imagine going, let's say, and all the lights are turned out, and you look up at the sky, you can see lots of stuff. Some person turned on a floodlight, and out pretty much all the stars.
With the power, even our own television camera can't adjust to the extreme contrast to sky. Jay Windley puts this theory into practice in the hope of disproving its recurring arguments.
We're going to find an identical camera loaded with identical film, and we won't get stars. Okay, I'm going to take a shot here. You notice here I'm not using any sort of a viewfinder.
Will be enough to invalidate the conspiracy theorists' claims. The morning after the shoot, the negatives are developed at a professional print in Los Angeles.
In our experiment in the desert, we shot a variety of photographs formats. Like the Apollo astronauts, we had to guess distances and our exposure settings. And because we had no view, guess at the direction the camera was pointing. And you can clearly see that even we were able to take quite usable photographs. You can immediately see that there are no stars in this photograph, even though the stars were very bright during they're simply too dim to be registered on film at the exposure to take these photographs.
That the stars could not have been seen in the photographs taken on the lunar surface. But this explanation doesn't satisfy Marcus Allen. He believes it's impossible that any of these photographs a journey to the moon and back in the first place.
Photographic film cannot withstand the vase. So how did they get all these fantastic photographs we've been shown about Apollo astronauts on the moon when the film was not in a print, let alone radiation protection?
Conspiracy, this is their trump card. Not only would it destroy film, it would kill the astronauts. The Earth's magnetic field protects our planet from solar rays, but beyond this zone, deep in space, is where conspiracy astronauts would be vulnerable to radiation's deadly effects.
They're radiated by the sun constantly, terrible heat, and of course there's cosmic radiation and meteorites that travel 60,000 miles an hour right through the camera, the film, and of course the astronauts themselves.
After leaving the Earth's atmosphere, the astronauts rocketed through the...
Van Allen, he said, of deadly radiation. You would pick up a death dose. About the time you got through the Van Allen shield, you'd be cooked and you'd be dying.
These radioactive belts form a thick ring encircling the equator out around the North and South poles.
Until they get an end, the life capsule surrounded by 6 feet of water, mass of lead, they don't even dare go through the Van Allen shield.
NASA knew it was dangerous. Don't think they went through the Van Allen belts, they would have said, how you feel? Any effect? You still feeling okay? Would say this, because if they were in any way incapacitated, it would be a disaster.
When NASA designed the trajectory to go through the Van Allen radiation belt, astronauts would go very, very quickly through there, so they wouldn't get a very high dosage. They also picked a part of the Van Allen radiation belt which the were quite weak.
NASA claims the astronauts endure exposure, penetrating the thinnest section of the belts in 1 hour.
The Van Allen radiation belt is a zone of radiation that's shaped a little bit like a donut with two strong, nasty area around here. As you can see, that's a darker area belt, and an outer belt over here, which is a little bit more benign. Now, the Apollo went on a trajectory which avoided the inner belts, so they were relatively safe there, and they went through fairly quickly, so they didn't hang around inside the Van Allen radiation.
But once they passed through, they faced an even greater.
So here we have these clowns in tinfoil craft stopping solar radiation and light. I'm talking about the radiation from the solar storms.
There's always risk in space. For example, you can have solar storms where you see the radiation being flung out from the sun.
These sun can knock out satellites and electricity grids on Earth, but they can also be detected by an early warning computer system.
If there was some form of solar storm, a big radiation disk, the astronauts could actually be exposed to an unacceptable hazard, real risk. So there were solar scientists actually monitoring activity to make sure that they weren't about to launch into a potential problem.
Just 3 months after the Apollo 16 mission, NASA admits solar flare hit the moon's surface. An eruption so would have killed the astronauts had they been there.
The American Apollo astronauts did not have against these levels of radiation. And we know that because NASA now, as a result of the Orion craft, which is Apollo 2.0, levels of radiation are such that they have to find out means to they can send humans through these levels of radiation. But they'd sent the Apollo astronauts, so what's the problem? The problem with Apollo astronauts.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal
before this decade is out, of landing and returning him safely to the Earth.
Those were the words of 1961. There were 3 parts of that sentence. Get humans to the moon before the decade is out, and safely was only one of the 3. And there were enough during the course of the Apollo program when particularly the phrase before the decade is out kind of took priority over safety. Sometimes they had to take some risks in order to keep to the schedule.
The astronauts could only rely on their spacecraft to land.
By studying the disk of the predictions about when these are going to likely happen and avoid them. And even if there was a storm, if the astronauts are in the command, rotate the command module so you've got a lot of the fuel, the oxygen between the astronauts and the direction the radiation's coming in. And if everyone could potentially go and hide behind a rock, or you could even launch off from the surface before the solar storm arrive.
Conspiracy theorists, radiation is the final nail in the coffin. They believe the astronauts could never have survived a trip to the moon and back. But could the objects they returned with key to unlocking secrets from the lunar surface itself and provide an answer to the question, did we really land on them? Conspiracy theorists believe rock from the missions was just another part of NASA's carefully engineered.
Wernher von Braun and a few guys from NASA went down. What was he doing in Antarctica? Finding moon rocks.
It's quite possible that these rocks have been doctored to give the semblance.
It'd be really, really tough to fake these things. It would be really hard now. Years ago, the idea that you would spend resources on producing some kind of secret and actually sending people to the moon to bring them back.
But how many people have actually examined the moon rock and where they came from? There's a great deal of doubt about it.
Internal missions brought back over 382 kilograms of lunar soil. These samples were distributed to laboratories all over the world. At the independent Berkeley Geochronology Center, geologist Paul Rene has been studying lunar rock samples. His main interest is these tiny glass spherules from the created by the intense heat of a meteorite impact.
Materials that we've been analyzing are tiny balls so they're like magma that we find on the Earth in that sense. They've cooled very, very quickly, and so they form essentially uniform glass.
Using a laser heating system to release gases locked inside, Paul Rene looks for evidence of cosmic radiation to uncover clues and place of origin.
The that we've analyzed and that others have analyzed show it been bombarded by cosmic radiation. And which because we have an atmosphere that really shields them very effectively.
Rene has determined these spherules date back 3.9 billion. This finding eliminates the possibility that they originated on Earth.
So the Earth, with its very dynamic environment, does not have these glassy objects, whereas the Moon, being essentially from a thermal point of view, does tend to preserve these things. Results that we obtained are absolutely definitively proof origin. I can say with utmost assurance that they're in the Moon.
But it's evidence the astronauts left behind back that may offer the clinching proof. Successful Apollo missions set up a range of experiments, and 5011, the lunar laser range, is still in use.
There were 2 major experiments, a series of corner reflectors to reflect laser Earth sent to the moon that then, because of these corner reflectors, would send the beam back in exactly the direction it.
But conspiracy theorists believe that these experiments were taken on the Apollo missions.
You don't need retroflex laser. It was being done by the Massachusetts Institute of 63. They were firing lasers at the moon. Then nobody had landed then, and they were getting a signal back.
This had already been achieved without a reflector. What was the advantage of this on the lunar surface?
There are no lasers there. NASA liked the business, so they could prove they went to the moon, part of their ploy.
You send a laser pulse from the Earth with a very powerful laser telescope at a location on the moon, and it reflects a lot of that, so it's fairly directional, it comes straight back to you, it doesn't get scattered. And balance between when you send the pulse and when you get the received pulse back, distance to the moon very precisely to literally centimeters.
The reflectors placed by the Apollo 11 crew allowed scientists to achieve about the Earth's position in the solar system.
Anybody in the world with a big telescope, a powerful laser, can bounce mission from NASA lasers off of those reflectors and measure the distance. To me, that the astronauts went there and they left these laser reflections.
If not, surely the Russians would have exposed the legitimacy of this half a century. At the height of the space race, the Soviet Union also had the technology to listen in on the Apollo missions. And yet, conspiracy theorists ignore the eavesdropping power of America's arch-enemies.
They weren't as close as they could get. Like any form on the part of either party would have been exposed by the other party very.
If the Russians said publicly it would need evidence, otherwise it would just be sour. But they had no evidence because NASA had everything.
But each raised by the Russians 50 years on, perhaps all great humans are destined to attract skepticism and controversy.
The landings, there will be men, there will be women on Mars soon. I hope that we don't see the same pattern of conspiracy simply because it'll be one of the biggest, if not the biggest.
They got to the moon in 1960s technology. Now without technology, etc., it's still going to take them 25 years just to get back. Now really there's something wrong there.
When we see conspiracy theories that become public, whistleblowers give away after a few years, even though there are only a small number of people involved. People seem to feel that a conspiracy has kept its secret years, even though tens of thousands of people were in on the secret.
It would take to create and hide a lie of such magnitude, it'd be for NASA to build a rocket and put man on the moon.